Michael Saylor has now doubled his Bitcoin accumulation plan that he outlined in late last year in 2024. Now here we are in 2025, and Michael today has announced another $21 billion worth of Bitcoin acquisitions. So in today's video, I want to talk about what's next. What's next for MicroStrategy stock? What's next for Bitcoin? What's next for market cycle theory when it comes to Bitcoin? This is the question everybody's asking. All of the texts, all of the emails, all of the phone calls I have, and way more than I can possibly ever get back to and explain in sufficient detail. So I thought I should make a video explaining my thoughts, my 2 cents of what I'm seeing, of what my guess of the next 6 to 12 months and potentially even longer is going to be. So here I am in my car. It's older than Bitcoin with my iPhone 7 that still works just fine. But let me read through what Michael announced today. MicroStrategy announces Bitcoin yield of 13.7% and Bitcoin dollar gain of $5.8 billion year to date. We're about a third of the way through 2025, believe it or not. So about $6 billion so far this year, doubling the capital plan to $42 billion of equity and $42 billion of fixed income. And yes, that means ATM, which we will talk about in just a moment. Is it good or bad? Maybe a little bit of both, depending on your frame, right? And increasing a Bitcoin yield target from 15% all the way up to 25%, and $10 billion to a Bitcoin dollar gain target from $10 billion to $15 billion for 2025. So what does this mean? What does it matter for you? Well, I think the important thing to understand here is that there's going to be a lot of conflict. There's going to be a lot of debate around this. And that's not going away, right? This is not going to be very clear for a very long time. Your expectation should be that pretty much everything from here on out is going to continue to have vigorous debate, right? You have Bitcoin nerd universe that you and I are in right now. Then you have, the rest of the world, right? Obviously, there's debate between those two worlds, but even within the Bitcoin universe, there's a lot of debate, right? We're seeing that literally right now with Bitcoin Core, and that's a whole separate topic, which we won't get into right now. We have debates there. There are debates all the time about self-custody versus holding paper Bitcoin. There are debates all the time about this, debates all the time about that. With MicroStrategy stock, there are debates about, is ATM good? Is it bad? Blah, blah, blah. Debates about everything. And so I'd make that very clear that you're going to hear a lot of differing opinions. And so where I hope that this video shines, where I hope that the mindset I try to instill into all of you dear viewers and friends is that of the word nuance. We need nuance, okay? Just because something is bad in a specific circumstance does not mean it's bad for everything. This is a conversation I have with every single client of mine at the Bitcoin Advisor, is that there's lots of products out there. Many of them are good, but just because there's a good product out there, it doesn't mean it's best for you. It could be very bad for you depending on what your specific goals are. And the same thing is true with MicroStrategy. So first, let's talk about, is it good or is it bad that MicroStrategy, Michael Saylor's company, now rebranded as Strategy, is it good or bad that Strategy, MSTR, is acquiring so much Bitcoin? They're at 2.5% of all the Bitcoin in the world. Michael Saylor himself is now talking about openly potentially getting 10% of the Bitcoin supply. Michael Saylor has implied that if Bitcoin goes to $1 million, that he aims to have, a few percent of, the Bitcoin out there, right? If he manages to get a million Bitcoin, that's a significant amount. That's about 5%, right? If he manages to get 10%, he thinks Bitcoin would be $50 million, right? And so a lot of people wonder, Luke, and they ask me, Luke, is it good or bad that Michael Saylor is getting so much Bitcoin? He's controlling the network and blah, blah, blah. I think what people need to remember is that the way I would put it is that it's a trade-off like everything else. Sure, it's a really big problem, I think, that Coinbase is involved with the custodial relationship with MicroStrategy. Do I think they actually have the Bitcoin? Yeah, I'm pretty confident they do. But when Michael and I had dinner last year, it was one of the things we talked about was about the custody setup. I don't know any specifics, obviously. I'm not claiming he told me any specifics, but he seemed fully confident. And in his public appearances too, in his public statement, he seems exceedingly confident. So maybe it's misplaced confidence, but I don't have any reason to think that it's paper Bitcoin, right? What I do think, though, is I think it's inevitable. If you're going to have Bitcoin actually become global-based money, you are going to have a significant portion of the individuals in the world not have that self-custody, right? And what's important to keep in mind is that, okay, let's say Michael Saylor via MSTR does get 5% of the Bitcoin supply under his umbrella, under his control. Sure, you could say that's a problem, but at the same time, we have to keep in mind is that the people buying his stock, the people buying his fixed income securities, people buying his annuities, convertible bonds, whatever else he's going to, make in the future, right? You have to understand all these people are going through him. He is the monopoly, right? He is a monopoly of this paper kind of Bitcoin that all these institutions are going through. And so for me personally, I do not think it is a threat to the network. It's a threat to people that have that counterparty risk exposure. Don't get me wrong, it absolutely is, right? As much as I love MicroStrategy stock, I'm well up in my position. I'm glad I have my position, right? I'm holding it. I'm not planning on selling it anytime soon, right? I've been holding it for years now, right? So, as somebody that owns SAYLOR paper, I want to make that very clear that I definitely think there is that counterparty risk there in holding the stock, but I don't believe it's a threat to the network at large, because you got to keep in mind, this isn't Michael Saylor's personal stack. This isn't one dude's stack. This is a corporation, a company holding Bitcoin on behalf of all these institutions. Would I rather see the fiat institutions of the world adopt this paper form of Bitcoin, or Bitcoin not at all? Obviously, I'd rather see them adopt the paper version, right? Or at least to me, that's obvious. So there's a trade-off there. Now, with this new $21 billion that was announced today, again, what you got to keep in mind is, again, there's going to be nuance. A lot of people are going to say, oh my gosh, this is horrible. He's crushing the premium. He's crushing the NAV. They're going to have so much at the money. They're going to crush the premium. You let the stock run, Michael. Blah, 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 right? And they have a point. It's not good. It's not good if you want your MicroStrategy to outperform Bitcoin in Bitcoin terms this year. More at the money is not good for you, because you're going to have your premium crushed, right? MicroStrategy MSTR is now at a 2x premium, right? But it was at a 4 to 6x premium in the last cycle, right? And I fully expect it's going to hit 1x premium again, right? And this is why it's so critical, again, to remind all of you watching that MicroStrategy, now known as Strategy, is not a long-term hodl like Bitcoin. I had a lot of people over the last few months that reached out to me that were very stressed because they had a very high allocation to MSTR, 20%, 80%, 100%, selling their Bitcoin for it, right? That is exceedingly high risk, right? If MSTR goes to a 4x multiple and you buy it at a 4x multiple, Bitcoin could remain flat in price and MSTR could fall 75% in a bear market. Okay, if Bitcoin falls 30% or 50%, you can bet your butt it's going to fall a lot further, right? Sometimes I meet people that say, oh, but Luke, Michael Saylor's a genius, and so therefore MicroStrategy is not going to collapse in a Bitcoin bear market. Maybe Bitcoin will have a big bear market, but they're just going to raise more capital and buy more Bitcoin. And with all due respect, I think you're delusional, and sometimes I'm very terrified when I see people making these kinds of comments, offhandedly with so much confidence. That's a really bad plan, okay? And if you don't believe me, just look at the last 6 months. MicroStrategy fell, 50%, something like that, and Bitcoin only fell 30% over the course of 3 months. What's going to happen when Bitcoin falls, let's say 50% over the course of 12 months? You think your MSTR is going to be flat in dollar terms or Bitcoin terms? No, of course the premium is going to get crushed. So, is Michael Saylor's new issuance of $21 billion, not that he issued it today, but is the announcement of the next $21 billion, is that going to be suppression for the MSTR price? Well, yeah, in Bitcoin terms it will be. It's going to limit the upside of the premium of MicroStrategy stock, MSTR, in terms of Bitcoin. So yes, definitely there is that downside. However, if you have a long time preference, and if you think about the big picture, that's exactly what you want, right? Like Michael understands you win the game by having the most Bitcoin. That's how you win the game. The whole thesis is convert the fiat premium of your corporate entity, of the stock, of the political currency you hold in your balance sheet, convert that premium into Bitcoin premium. That is the whole play. That has always been the play. It is not changing. And so it's very funny to me When people with the time preference of thinking of only this year go out there and say, oh, this at the money issuance is bad, and, you know, stop selling shares to buy the Bitcoin, let the premium run. I don't think you understand that Michael's playing the 50-year long game. He's not playing the 5-month game here, right? And the company that wins is the company that gets the most Bitcoin. Okay, another question I'm having a lot recently is about the Jack Mallers 21 company issuance, right? You know, the Tether and Cantor Fitzgerald, SoftBank, you know, that whole thing, right? You know, I've talked about it in previous videos, but that is really important as a counter here, right? They've not yet bought the 42,000 Bitcoin. A lot of people are buying the stock, you know, assuming they're going to get that, right? But they might get 42,000. In fact, they might even get 100,000, maybe even more, right? That's totally possible. But I don't think they can catch Michael, right? And one of the things I don't like is that they're being actually quite hostile in their marketing against MSTR, which I think is kind of a red flag. I mean, if you understand the business model, you understand that actually everything you're doing is strengthening MSTR, and everyone that's going to copy you is going to strengthen you, right? This is a, you know, it's a first mover advantage. It's very strong by being the one in second place, trying to, you know, poo-poo on the one in first place. You're kind of, it seems like you're missing something there, but that's a whole side note. I don't know really what's going on there, what they're thinking when they're talking about that. The larger point I'm making here is that even those in second, third, or fourth place just aren't going to be able to catch Michael. He's going to be able to have more competitive convertible notes. He's going to be able to have more competitive equity issuances. He's going to be more competitive at getting more Bitcoin. And a lot of people, I think, blindly assume, hey, these smaller treasury companies for Bitcoin are going to be the better bet because, well, hey, it's a lot easier for a company with 10,000 Bitcoin to get to 20,000 than it is for Michael Saylor to double his stack, right? And sure, you might be right. Sure, maybe a company starting out from a smaller balance is going to be easier to have their Bitcoin yield accelerate, right? That's totally possible. But I would caution people and say that's not necessarily guaranteed. The thing you're forgetting about is that MicroStrategy, MSTR, is going to be viewed as the lower risk Bitcoin treasury monopoly when compared to all these others. And when you have a pool of hundreds of trillions of dollars of capital in the debt market, where are they going to go? They're going to go to the one that has the volume to service them. They're going to go to the one that's the actual competitive one for them, right? In the same way that people like you and me aren't able to create a Bitcoin treasury company in the same way that, like, let's say a Metaplanet or Similar Scientific is, the reality is that a Similar Scientific or a Metaplanet, maybe even 21, right? These kinds of companies aren't going to be able to do what Michael Saylor does because they're not going to be able to tap into a market with the kind of volume that these large markets require, right? It's the same kind of idea behind the power law and behind Bitcoin and price appreciation, right? No country is going to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve when the entire market cap of Bitcoin is just a couple $100 million back in 2012 or whatever, right? It's like you got to wait for the size of the asset class to grow before you can justify putting money in, right? Especially the larger of an institution you are. And so my point here is that I think a lot of people, you know, again, you're going to see a lot of people in the coming weeks and months be exceedingly angry, exceedingly euphoric, insanely controversial on everything. Some people are going to say, oh, MSTR is not a buy because all these other treasury companies are the better buy because they're starting up from zero and they're just starting, blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to give you that nuance that they have a point, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're correct, right? And likewise, sure, you know, MSTR has benefits, but not necessarily all of them, right? You know, there are going to be other people that say all of them are scammers, it's all blah, 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 whatever. Another thing to think about, too, is that I've been pounding the table on this recently, and it really is important, so I'll say it again. These are the new altcoins. I don't think most people in crypto, well, I know most people in crypto don't understand that, okay? Let me emphasize this again. I know so many people, many of you are watching, you know that in heart you might think you're Bitcoin maxis, and maybe you are, but you are still holding on to those altcoins, waiting for that last little pump to exit. I'm telling you, I think this is a really big problem for you, okay? Because think about how Bitcoin cycles have happened in past history, right? The first step is that Bitcoin price goes up, right? The second step is that the altcoins follow Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin goes up in price. The FOMO and the retail excitement spills over into the altcoins. People start rotating the profits in Bitcoin into the altcoins, right? This is where the crypto casinos like, you know, Coinbase survive, right? That's that whole business model. That's how that works, right? But the interesting thing with these new securities, with these new Bitcoin treasury companies is, again, I am supportive of them because they are altcoins, right? And the same, Vitalik Buterin is to Ethereum, just like Charles Hoskinson is to Cardano, just like Michael Saylor is to MSTR. You should think of it like an altcoin. But there is a key critical difference. Michael Saylor is being honest and transparent in what he's going to do, right? Vitalik and Hoskinson, are not nearly as transparent as Saylor is. Saylor has made it very clear. We have a fiat premium. We're going to crush that fiat premium continuously to buy more Bitcoin. He's out there advocating for people buying Bitcoin, not buying his token. Obviously, many people buy his token, myself included, with a, smaller single-digit percentage of my portfolio, but the same thing remains true, right? It's the same concept. It's just an altcoin. But the key critical difference between the altcoins of MSTR and 21 and Similar Scientific and Metaplanet and all the other Treasury companies that are coming out, and believe me, they're coming out sooner than later. I've had multiple meetings with different Treasury companies that are going to be listed and come out in the next, hopefully, 6 months, right? So there are a lot of them coming, right? And there's also GameStop, which is, we'll see if they actually do buy Bitcoin. But the point is, the difference with these securities, these registered securities that are buying Bitcoin, the difference with those when compared to the unregistered securities, the difference is the FOMO peak is in front, not behind. Okay, this is really important, okay? With Ethereum, Cardano, Polkadot, Polygon, whatever, all those, right? All those altcoins, right? The difference is they peak after Bitcoin. Bitcoin pumps, people rotate profits from Bitcoin to the altcoins. And that is typically what helps shorten the life cycle of the Bitcoin upward move in previous cycles, right? The more people rotate to altcoins, the more that people sell off Bitcoin, the more they sell off Bitcoin, the less excitement there is, and then the whole thing falls apart, right? But the difference with these treasury companies, even though you should think of them like altcoins, the difference is because they're ethical and because they're being honestly issued instead of dishonestly issued, what that means is that they're getting new capital from people, right? The premium from the stock market and the bond market flows to these securities, to these, companies, these treasury companies, and then the capital flows into Bitcoin, right? The peak valuation of the crypto casino in terms of Bitcoin historically is after Bitcoin peaks. The peak of the premium of these securities peaks before Bitcoin, right? MicroStrategy, MSTR, peaked before Bitcoin did. It did this in November of last year. It did this in March of last year in 2024. It did this multiple times in 2023, 2022, 2021, and even in late 2020, maybe you can make that argument, right? And it's because profits rotate from the premium of that stock. They collapse the premium of the stock to convert it into Bitcoin. Because if they're smart and they're like Michael Saylor, they understand that they are willing to sacrifice the temporary upside of the extra premium of their stock in terms of Bitcoin in exchange for getting the hard, pristine collateral, which is Bitcoin for the long term. And the reason why I mention all this is a few different reasons. Number one, if you're in the crypto casino, I would strongly encourage you to run! Get out! What are you doing? Do you not see what's happening here? Do you understand? The MSTR is barely $100 billion in size. They're going to buy another $21 billion. Do you understand the market cap of XRP and Ethereum and Cardano? Do you understand how grossly overvalued the crypto casino is? It is literally still $1 trillion market. Who's buying it? I don't know. You understand that when retail FOMO comes back? Oh, yeah, but look, I'll hold on all my altcoins for the retail FOMO. Do you understand that when all the retail degens come in, being illogical, having their anchoring bias, have their unit bias, thinking they're too late to Bitcoin, and they come to speculate with their 401k money and their gambling money, reversing their, having second mortgages and whatever to buy stupid high speculation plays, do you understand that when the degens come, they're going to arrive at the treasury companies? They're not going to go to some token they've not heard before, they don't understand. GameStop is a better meme than Polkadot, right? Michael Saylor is a better meme than Charles Hoskinson, right? Now, all this is just my opinion. Obviously, none of this financial advice, but I think you're going to be very happy if you're a gambling degen to exit the unregistered securities and altcoins and understand, like I've been saying for years, that you have less in common with the near future than the ancient past, okay? The same thing is true with these altcoins, okay? We are at the very beginning of altcoins. That offends a lot of people. There are the Bitcoin maxis, me being one of them. There are the Bitcoin maxis that want to see everybody do self-custody, everybody do Bitcoin only, and no premium to anything else. I get it. That's eventually where everything's going. Well, not the self-custody part. But the majority of altcoins are in front of us, not behind us, and all those altcoins are going to be registered. They're going to have access to this kind of capital, right? Nobody's going to buy your stupid little piece of code that's not backed by any Bitcoin treasury that could be shut off on a whim, that's difficult to buy, right? All the people are going to be the degen FOMO people. They're all going to just kind of convert their retirement portfolios into whatever Bitcoin treasury company because it's easier. They can recognize it that the treasury company CEO is always on TV. They don't know anything about this other project. You know, people can articulate it. People are going to get duped into that. And I'm also saying that to make it very clear, I think potentially that could be a theoretical top for the market. I think it's going to be very interesting to see if this Bitcoin cycle actually extends. Why? Because the other altcoins are in a zero-sum game against Bitcoin, right? When people sell $1 million of Bitcoin to put it into Ethereum, that's $1 million of sell pressure on Bitcoin is going to Ethereum, right? When people put the $1 million of Bitcoin into the treasury companies, some of that capital flows back into Bitcoin. So that's another reason why I think that the old world altcoins are going to die, is because these new world altcoins can keep their numbers going up so much longer than the altcoins. Because the more that all these treasury companies keep buying Bitcoin, the more Bitcoin just keeps going up for longer, right? Which means that they can keep issuing more premium, right? So that's the first thing I really would emphasize in this, is that for many of you watching that are stuck, feeling stuck, holding the altcoins, I get it. You want to outperform Bitcoin. You're probably down your position. Maybe you're flat. Maybe you're up a little bit. I don't know. But I would strongly encourage you, whatever you do, think about the things I'm saying here. Understand and ask yourself genuinely, why are people going to buy the stuff I'm holding? And even if they do, what incentive or prevention is there from the issuer of these tokens to just print more tokens? The person in charge of your little altcoin on Coinbase, the person in charge of your little altcoin, they're in the exact same business as Michael Saylor. Convert premium for more Bitcoin. That's what Vitalik does. That's what Hoskinson does. That's what all of them do. Convert premium of our own token into Bitcoin. The difference is, with a registered institution, you actually get some ownership indirectly on paper to the Bitcoin that institution acquires. It's more ethical. It's registered. It's going to be a feedback loop that I think is going to be crushing to the altcoins. Okay, again, to make it very clear, I think the degens are going to come back. I think that the Bitcoin, self-custody maxis are going to have a really hard time with that, myself included. Like, I'm partially making this video to make it very clear. I think this is what's going to happen. I hold MicroStrategy. I hold Bitcoin. I think the next year is going to be really great for us, like people like you or me that are currently in the little Bitcoin nerd bubble. But what I think is totally going to happen is I think people are going to FOMO in. People are going to, take out too much leverage. Things are going to get crazy. And then Bitcoin's going to fall, 30, 50, 70%, maybe 50, I don't know. It's going to fall some non-zero percentage. And then the treasury companies are going to get crushed. Most of them are going to fall 50, 75, 80, 90%. And people at the very top of the market will be saying, Luke, why are you the Bitcoin multi-sig self-custody person? Blah, blah, blah. Oh, I'm just going to buy the treasury company because that's so much better. I actually make more of my Bitcoin, blah, blah, blah. I think that's totally the next altcoin reckoning, so to speak, is when the treasury companies underperform, because most people that will be entering at that point will have not had gone through Bitcoin bear markets in the past. I think it's going to be a really brutal lesson. But all I have to say is that I think that the altcoins have a really hard time, because in a bear market, I think the altcoins are going to have a rough time. I think they're going to underperform Bitcoin. And even in a bull market, I just don't know how they're going to compete with SAYLOR and with all these other companies, okay? And so that's the other thing I would like to touch on too. I already touched on it briefly, but I think what SAYLOR is doing, not only do I think it's evidence of the debate rapidly approaching between the people that want to see a higher premium versus a higher Bitcoin stack. Obviously, I'm in the camp that I want to see him get a higher Bitcoin stack because I have a longer term time horizon. So, that's one nuance I've already covered. The second one I've already covered is that between old world and new world altcoins. The third thing I want to cover here is that of the Bitcoin cycle. It's what everybody wants to know. Luke, when do you think that we're going to top? Luke, how high do you think we'll go in the cycle? I don't know, okay? But I do think I do everything I can to think of probabilities, and I think there is a very strong case to be made that, hey, wait a second. If we get more and more Michael Saylor copycats, we have more and more companies issuing stock premium to then take that premium for the rest of the stock market and convert that premium into Bitcoin. I think it's totally possible we could see a very legitimate, very real extension to the Bitcoin cycle, right? Maybe maybe, I'm not saying I necessarily believe this, but what if the traditional 4-year cycle as we know it is kind of dead, but instead we see a massive volatile cycle for the Bitcoin treasury companies, right? Instead of seeing Bitcoin fall 90%, 80%, 75% like it's done, for whatever times it has, right? What if we start seeing that with the treasury companies and they skyrocket and they collapse, they skyrocket and they collapse, right? Maybe that's the kind of thing that we see, right? Or maybe nothing is different and this time exactly the same. But all these things I think are critical to think about. And I think the most important thing you can do if you are trying to maximize your Bitcoin stack is think in nuances, think in probabilities. Okay, I have clients with hundreds of Bitcoin. I have clients with 1/10 of a Bitcoin, right? The funny thing, okay, and I say this to almost everyone that I talk to that schedules a call with me. The funny thing, the difference between the poor mindset and the wealthy mindset, between the scarcity mindset and the non-scarcity, the abundance mindset. The main difference I see is that the people that aren't thinking in scarcity, the people that aren't thinking in absolutes and thinking in probabilities, those people tend to make lots of better decisions. And for me, it's a lot easier to encourage them to make better decisions and to have conversations about things that are good for them in the long run, because they understand everything has a trade-off, right? You could scream and shout in joy when Bitcoin price is rocketing to the moon because you're making more and more purchasing power, right? Sure, but you could also cry because you know that your ability to stack more Bitcoin is collapsing in real time, right? There is a positive and a negative. There's a trade-off to Bitcoin mooning upwards, right? The same thing is true in a bear market, okay? People in a scarcity mindset think it's all or nothing, right? People in a scarcity mindset only look at one aspect of a system, and they only look at the negatives of when that specific aspect of the system doesn't go in their own way, right? The real estate gambler, the real estate degen, only cares about if house prices go up, right? But the wealthy, right, the long-term holder, right, the focused, the rich, the well-connected, the one that thinks in probabilities and nuances, they understand that, hey, when house prices are skyrocketing higher, that's the time to refinance, right? And likewise, when house prices are falling, that's the time to buy cheap, right? Like, it's never too late to enter the housing market, quote unquote. And I know we're talking about a fiat thing here, but the principle still stands, right? In terms of Bitcoin, the same thing is true, right? You can cry and complain that, oh, MicroStrategy and Michael SAYLOR are going to issue all this $21 billion in new debt and new capital, and they're going to crush the premium of the stock, blah, blah, blah. Sure, you can say it's a negative, or you could say it's a positive of, hey, they're going to get way more Bitcoin in the long run because Michael is actually intelligent and understands acquiring Bitcoin premium over the next 10 years is way more important than preserving some temporary fiat premium of his institution, right? Because he knows that lots of other people are going to copy him, right? And so this is my point. This is the thing I would encourage all of you to think about. Keep every situation in mind and understand that you're going to hear a lot of strong takes from every camp. Am I still recording? My camera made it look like I stopped recording. Anyway, you're going to hear a lot of strong takes from a lot of strong-minded people on virtually every aspect of every issue. Personally, I think we have a lot more upside. I think MicroStrategy, MSTR, is going to pump. I think it's going to be fabulous. I did buy some options on MSTR. I haven't talked about that publicly, but I've been talking about that with my clients. That's done very well so far. It's up 3x or so so far, which is nice. I think there's more room to run. I still firmly believe MSTR is going to be well over $1,000 at some point this year. I even think 2,000 is not unreasonable. And again, if you don't believe me, keep in mind that MSTR basically has to increase by a factor of 2.5x, close to 3x, to meet Ethereum. How many Bitcoin does Vitalik have on his balance sheet? Right? Oh, right. Nothing. Basically, and you can't buy exposure to that, right? So, anyway, I think there's a lot more upside ahead for Bitcoin. I think this is an excellent time to be bullish. I think Bitcoin is super cheap. I think MSTR is super cheap. I think it is critical to remind everybody that there are going to be a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies that will probably outperform MSTR, right? In fact, I'm going to be investing in one of those treasury companies that's not yet listed, but they've asked me if I'd invest. So I am going to invest in them, just being in full transparency. That's going to be the only other Bitcoin treasury company I'm invested in other than MSTR. I can't say any more about that publicly because, whatever, privacy and stuff. But the point is that there are going to be some companies that outperform MSTR. And then everyone's going to say, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread, right? And with MSTR, it's going to be the same thing. When MSTR is outperforming Bitcoin, everybody's going to say, oh, to the moon, right? NAV premium to the moon, right? But you got to keep in mind, if you're thinking like the wealthy, and if you're thinking in terms of trade-offs and thinking in terms of probabilities, everything has a pro, everything has a con, right? What goes up comes back down. What goes down typically comes back up, right? You have to understand, if you're actually going to manage these things, you have to understand the nuances of everything you're looking at. And if you don't understand that, if you're only focused on one component of the system and you don't understand how the whole feedback loop works, and that's where you're going to get burnt. That's where you're going to get really hurt. And as a final encouragement at the end of this video, if you want to simplify your life, just stick to Bitcoin, right? This is the other funny thing. It's interesting for me to mention, right? Whenever I post about Bitcoin and self-custody, everybody's like, oh, but Luke, MSTR is so much easier to custody. And when I post about MSTR, everybody's like, yeah, but Luke, counterparty risk, right? Everybody wants to be butthurt about something, right? And that's why I don't really care what you say, right? There's gonna be negative comments down below. I don't really care. It's funny when people think that they offend me. It's like, dude, I've been here a long time. I was literally, sleeping in my car. I was making my first videos, or nobody, like I was here when nobody cared about me. And so the fact that, you haters don't care about me, like I really don't care. And it's quite adorable that you think I do care. But the point is that there's gonna be a lot of strong takes. And the point is that everybody's going to have an opinion on everything. So I would say just stay focused, understand the trade-offs of every component of this financial engineering engine, right? Understand those cycles, understand the trade-offs, and then you will much better understand if this, then that, if this, then that, right? Everything is an if-then statement, everything's a probability, everything's a trade-off, right? And I know that what I'm saying here in this whole video, not a lot of it has been charts, not a lot of it has been bullish hopium, blah, 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 but this is what you need to hear, right? I made a video, okay, and I'm not saying this to brag, I'm just saying this to give an example of what I'm talking about, right? I made a video within 24 hours, and I posted it. You can find it if you go in my video history here, right? I've not changed the title, I've not changed the thumbnail, I've not deleted the video, I've not edited the video, I've not deleted other videos of different opinions. I made a video within 24 hours of the MSTR top in November of 2024 saying, this feels like a top, okay? And guess what? People didn't click on that video. That video got about 1/10 of as many views as what it should have gotten. Okay, the reason is because the algorithm feeds you the content that is going to give you the most dopamine. It's not going to feed you the content you need to hear if you actually make money. Now, am I saying that, oh, you should follow me, so I'm going to help you call the top? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that it's very easy to get sucked down the narrative rabbit hole. It's very easy to get sucked down, the chart porn, right? This conversation we're having right here is really important. It's really boring, right? It probably doesn't get your dopamine going, but it's really important. And that's why I'm making this video now, because the people that come in 6 months or 12 months from now, frankly, I don't really have a lot of hope for them, at least for this cycle, at hearing the message we have to share. Because if they didn't care beyond, if they did care beyond the dopamine, they'd be here right now. But if they're entering in a market FOMO time where there's a lot of excitement already, they're not going to hear this message. You people listening to me right now actually have a hope and chance of heeding my warnings, right? And so that's the big thing I would encourage you to understand. If you want to keep your life simple, don't play with investing, just save. Save in Bitcoin. MSTR is a trade. SAYLOR is a trade. Okay, 21 is a trade. All these treasury companies are a trade. They are not going to have premiums against their Bitcoin forever. There will be times where the premiums explode, and there will be times where the premium collapses. And when it explodes, everybody's going to say one thing. When it collapses, everybody's going to say the other, right? But you have to understand, I think there's a long runway ahead. I think we're at the very beginning of the Bitcoin Treasury playbook. If you don't believe me, keep in mind that the altcoin market is multiple times larger than the entire Bitcoin Treasury market right now. And we're talking about a market that should be literally 100 times bigger than the entire crypto casino market cap, right? Conservatively. So I think we're at the very beginning. I think there is opportunity in these Bitcoin Treasury companies if you want to invest in them. But do not forget that they aren't Bitcoin. They have way higher risk than Bitcoin in terms of price, in terms of counterparty risk, right? If you want to focus on the future, focus on long-term savings and focus on self-custody. I talk about Bitcoin multi-sig all the time. I think pretty clear, it's become really apparent to people why I've been talking about Bitcoin multi-sig for literally years now. It is the best possible route for you yourself to become a Bitcoin treasury company, okay? if you want to borrow new capital, right? If you want to borrow new capital to acquire Bitcoin, people are not going to lend you new capital to buy Bitcoin if you have everything in Coinbase or an ETF, right? They will be much more willing to lend you capital if you have your Bitcoin in a multi-sig arrangement that's escrow compatible with 0 single point of failure. That is what is coming. That is why I focus on this. Focus on reducing the risk of the holdings of your savings so that people in the future will be more willing to work with you to figure out ways to help you acquire more Bitcoin, because it's also in their own self-interest, right? So that is my encouragement. I hope this video has been useful. If you enjoyed just me being me and me not being an agenda, right, and me not, taking a marketing budget from any given company to push some product down your throat, if you appreciate that, please like and subscribe. Frankly, I do give up growth metrics, for the sake of doing videos like this, like the videos where I make this or walk around talking, right? Those videos don't perform as well, right? And, frankly, I don't care, because if I couldn't clear my conscience when I make these videos and do these things, I would cease to make videos. So if you appreciate me just speaking my mind and saying what I genuinely think, I hope you appreciate that. I'm not saying other people don't. I think lots of people, most people in Bitcoin, well, a lot of people in Bitcoin are very genuine, and, there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. But, I do think that that's it's just a bit of a trade-off, right? Like I described before, I made 2 videos in November of 2024 about MicroStrategy. One was about the long-term bullish case for Bitcoin, for MicroStrategy, MSTR, and the other was literally within 24 hours of the top, saying this feels like a top, and it got 1/10 of the views of the other one, right? Both of them were just me. Both of them were giving the honest opinions, but the algorithm pushes stuff it wants you to watch. So if you're one of the few people that actually clicked on this video and watched this entire video, thank you for subscribing, because I think that will mean you like watching other videos I make in the future. So thank you, everybody, for your time, and those are my thoughts about the Michael Saylor playbook. I think it's very good for long-term MicroStrategy, MSTR. Of course, it's going to offend people because he's going to crush the premium again, but if you're bullish on Bitcoin, then it's exactly what you want. But remember, it's just a trade. There are going to be cycles, and everything has nuance. Okay, so I wish you all the best of luck in figuring it out. Feel free to reach out to me, book a call, text me, email me, whatever. I'll do my absolute best to get back to you as fast as I can, although things are going to get really busy, even more busy than they currently are. So thank you, everybody, for your time, and I hope that you're enjoying the spring weather. I am loving the spring weather. It's, going to be exciting the rest of the year ahead. So thank you, everybody.